We thought about moving to the Coliseum, but they were booked.
Check them out.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Thoreau, and I'm the president of the Independent Institute. I'm delighted to welcome you here this evening, including our viewers who are joining us on C-SPAN. This evening's program is part of an expanded series of lectures, seminars, and debates that we're holding at the Independent Institute. Roughly, they're held once or twice per month here at our conference center in Oakland, California. As many of you know, the Independent Institute regularly holds programs featuring outstanding scholars, policy experts, and authors of important books, and people who have insights to public policy that we think is important to share with other people. For those of you who are new to the Institute, you'll find information in your packets. There's also information on our website, which is www.independent.org. We welcome you to join with us in our many services and publications. The Institute is a public policy research institute. We produce many books. We produce a quarterly journal called the Independent Review and many other studies, and we host many conference and media projects based on that work. We accept no government funding, and our support is drawn from a wide range of private sources, individuals, businesses, other organizations, foundations, and so on. I'd like to personally thank the Cheaper Stores, who's one of the sponsors of our series of events here at the Independent Institute. I also wanted to thank Robert Mondavi Winery, who graciously provided the wines that many of you hopefully have enjoyed. The topics of the program that we focus on deal with economics, history, law, political science, as they affect many major issues that Americans have to deal with. In your packet, you'll also find information about upcoming events. In mid-September, on the 14th, we'll have a program on the heavily debated issue these days on the Second Amendment and the issue of crime and violence, featuring Joyce Malcolm from Bentley College, who has an important book from Harvard University Press called To Keep and Bear Arms, as well as Don Cates, the civil rights attorney. On October 20th, our program will focus on virtual money, e-commerce, and the internet. We'll feature Richard Rahn, who's former chief economist with the U.S. Chamber, is now senior fellow at the Discovery Institute. And on November 17th, we will hold a program on the American Civil War, featuring the historian Henry Mayer and his award-winning book, All on Fire, on William Lloyd Garrison and the abolition of slavery, as well as the economist and historian Jeffrey Rogers Hummel and his book, Emancipating Slaves, Enslaving Free Men. And we hope that you'll all be able to join with us at each of those programs. This evening, however, we are indeed privileged to have one of the brightest beacons of economic and ethical sense around in the US and elsewhere. I'm sure many of you would agree with me about that. Professor Walter Williams combines an unwavering commitment to the interconnected principles of economic and civil liberties. Drawing on his new book, which I hope everyone here will not leave home without one, More Liberty Means Less Government, Professor Williams is a well-respected scholar, syndicated columnist, talk show host, an all-around dragon slayer of political lunacy and buncombe, as H.L. Mencken might have put it. This evening, Walter will examine some of the bureaucratic myths and legends, the bureaucratic record, and contrast it with free market societies based on the principle that all people have the right to be free. More specifically, with the dubious, and I would suggest, quite frankly, dysfunctional record of politics and bureaucracy in addressing so many issues. Most people would agree anecdotally that when they come into contact with government institutions, there's something missing, there's something wrong. And we're suggesting that from an economic standpoint, this is not simply an accident. Professor Williams is Distinguished John M. Olin Professor and Chairman of the Department of Economics at George Mason University. He's also, and we're very pleased that he is, a member of the advisory board of the Independent Institute. He received his PhD in economics from UCLA. He also holds a Doctor of Humane Letters degree from Virginia Union University, and he's been on the faculty of Los Angeles City College, California State University at Los Angeles, and Temple University in Philadelphia. Professor Williams is also the author of 5 other books in addition to his newest, as well as technical articles in top academic journals, and his weekly newspaper column is nationally syndicated by Scripps Howard. Many of you may also be familiar with the fact that he's a regular guest host on the Rush Limbaugh program. I should add that Walter is someone who's been featured in many different major television series over the years. He was a major participant in Milton Friedman's program Free to Choose and the program Star Spangled Lion, both on PBS, as well as appearing on programs like ABC's Night Watch and many programs on CNN. An earlier book of his, which is one of my favorites, it's a book called The State Against Blacks, was also made into a very successful PBS television documentary called Good Intentions. And if I could put a plug, our journal, The Independent Review, has an excellent review by him, which I suspect means that if you don't subscribe, you will deeply offend him, and we don't want that to happen. So I'm very pleased to introduce Professor Walter Williams.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that very warm welcome. What I plan to do tonight is not so much a lecture, but to have a conversation about some of my ideas that I discuss in my syndicated columns and some other miscellaneous articles that you'll find in the book. Now, I know it seems like this is a very friendly audience, but try to ask me hard questions. You know, you can kind of say, well, look, Walter, I have a liberal friend, and he told me to ask you. You can try that. But let me kind of start off by just saying, the first principle in terms of how I relate to my fellow man, and that is the principle of self-ownership, and you'll see this all through my columns. That is, I believe the notion that we got from John Locke, and namely in his second treatise on government, that each of us owns ourselves. That is, I am my private property. You are your private property. You belong to yourself. Now, if you accept that as the initial premise, or as the first principle, then what constitutes just rules of conduct are very easy. That is, why is murder wrong? Because it violates private property. Why is rape wrong or immoral? It violates private property. Why is theft wrong? It violates private property. So starting out from that initial premise, I think everything is fairly easy. Now, it gets a little more complex when we look at our everyday lives. When we ask, what should be the role of government in a free society? Well, I think at least one role of government should not be that of violating private property. But however, that's the major function of the United States government, and governments almost everywhere. We, as Americans, we support government doing things that if a private person did the identical thing, we would all roundly condemn him as a low-down, despicable thief. And for example, I could see an elderly lady sleeping on a grate in downtown San Francisco over the winter, and she needs some dental care, she needs some food, she needs some housing. And I could walk up to David with a gun in my hand. I could say, David, give me your $200. And having gotten his $200, I go down, buy the lady some medical attention and some housing and some food. Would you find me guilty of a crime? Yes, I would. I would be guilty of theft, regardless of what I did with the money. Because theft is defined as taking the rightful property of one person and giving it to another to whom it does not belong. Now, most Americans can buy that. But however, there's a problem. Now, the question is suppose the federal government, the agents of the United States Congress came up to me and said, Williams, you know that $200 you made last week that you had planned to buy 2 nice bottles of Lafite Rothschild Bordeaux wine with it? You will not do that with the money. We will go downtown and help the lady out. Now, I assert that there's no conceptual distinction between those two acts. That is, both acts involve taking the property of one American and giving it to another to whom it does not belong. Now, if you press me for a distinction, the only distinction I can find is that the first act where I walked up to David, that is illegal theft. The second act is legal theft, but nonetheless theft, all the same. Now, we as moral people, we cannot allow legality alone to be our talisman. Because many things in this world are or were legal, but clearly immoral. That is, slavery was legal. Did that make it moral? Apartheid in South Africa was legal. That didn't make it moral. Or the Nazi persecution of Jews, the Stalinist purges, the Maoist purges, they were all legal, but clearly immoral. That is, you and I as Americans, we need to ask the question, is there a moral basis for taking the property of one person and giving it to another to whom it does not belong? Now, it turns out that is 3/4, or at least 2/3 of what the federal government spends money for. That is, if you look at the expenditures of our government, most of them consist of nothing more than legalized theft. Now, a lot of people will say to me, well, Williams, you know, all these things you disagree with, they are a result of the fact that we have a democracy and it's majority rule. Well, first of all, I try to tell the person, well, the framers did not intend for it to be a democracy. It was to be a republic. But the more important thing is that just because we vote to steal from somebody doesn't make it right. Doesn't make it right at all. Now, I think that what we have to recognize, and the framers of the Constitution, our founders recognize this, is that in general, government is the enemy of the people. That is because the essence of government is coercion. Now, we do need some government, as Thomas Paine and others recognize, because men are not angels. We need to have government to stop you from taking my money or stop me from murdering you, so we do need government. But beyond that, that is the only role for government in a free society, is to stop one person from coercing another. That's the basic role of government in a free society. And the framers knew this well, and they sought to limit the government. And if you read the Constitution of the United States, it's very, very negative language. If you read it says, you find words like Congress shall not infringe, Congress shall not disparage, Congress shall not do, et cetera, et cetera. It's all negative language because the framers recognized that government was in general the enemy of the people. Now, you might say, well, what's some more evidence of government being the enemy of the people? Well, by the way, I will run into people, particularly lawyers, and they'll tell me, Williams, you shouldn't be so narrow in your interpretation of the Constitution. Because the Constitution is a living document, they tell me. Well, That's if you say that the Constitution is a living document, that is the same as saying we have no Constitution. That is, how would you like to play me poker and the rules be living? I mean, maybe my two pair could beat your flesh, depending on the circumstances. Now, going back to just more evidence of that government is in general the enemy of the people, is that if you look at, this century is closing. Matter of fact, by the way, the new century does not begin next year. But the century is closing. And I think that this will go down in history as the most brutal century in the history of mankind. And some numbers, if you go through a fellow's book, it's Professor Rummel at the University of Hawaii, and it's a book called Death by Government, an excellent book. He points out that in this century, 40 to 50 million people were killed during war. That's an awesome number. But 170 million people were murdered by their own government. The leader in this was Stalin, the Soviet Union, 65 million people. Mao Zedong, 35 million people. Hitler was just a third-rate guy. I mean, 18 million. People murdered by their own government. Now, why, if you ask the question, how was this done? Now, if Stalin and Hitler, or Stalin and Lenin, or Stalin and Mao Zedong, if they had lived during the 18th century, they could not have murdered as many people. Why? Because government did not have that kind of power during that time. That is the major phenomena of the 20th century was the consolidation of power in government. And this is what the framers of our nation were so fearful of, the consolidation of power. Now, so I look at government's role as being very, very limited. And if you read Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution, it's about 19 things the federal government should do. And it's nothing in there about Social Security. Matter of fact, the word does not appear in the Constitution. The word education does not appear in the United States Constitution. Now, another thing that I also point out in a number of my columns is I talk about the issue of race. And tragically enough, racial discrimination in the United States could have died a well-deserved death a number of years ago. But somehow it's managed to be resuscitated almost daily. I don't believe that racial discrimination explains very much of what we see today in our country. I believe that one of the very important oversights that we ignore, or one of the things that we ignore when we look at matters of race, is that we fail to acknowledge the tremendous gains that Black Americans have made in the United States. I believe, if I'm not being too chauvinistic, I believe it's safe to say that Black Americans have made the greatest gains over some of the highest hurdles in the shortest period of time than any other racial group in the history of mankind. Now you say, well, what's the evidence for that? Well, if you added up the earnings of Black people each year and just thought of Black people as a nation, and you looked at the GNP of Black people, it would turn out that we would be the 13th or 14th richest nation on the face of this earth, coming in just behind Switzerland or Canada. Black Americans are some of the world's most famous personalities. Black Americans are some of the world's richest people. It was a black American, Colin Powell, who was the commander of the world's mightiest military. Now, in 1865, neither a slave nor a slave owner would have believed these kind of gains would be possible in just over 100 years, if ever. Now, that speaks very well of the intestinal fortitude of a people, but just as important, it speaks very well of a nation in which these gains are possible. That is, those gains would not have been possible anywhere else on the face of this earth except the United States of America. Now there are problems that remain. That is, some of these gains have been elusive for a significant portion of the black community, but it has nothing to do with racial discrimination. That is, one devastating thing that's happening in black communities is the high illegitimacy rate. Now, but however, that has nothing to do with racial discrimination. That is, matter of fact, illegitimacy rate among black teenagers in 1918 was less than that among white teenagers in 1918. In fact, there's another big problem, the breakdown of the black family. And probably breakdown is not the proper word. It means, I should say, not forming in the first place. And this is entirely unprecedented. That is, only 40% of black kids live in two-parent families. Now, back in 1925 in Harlem, 85% of black kids lived in two-parent families. In 1870 and 1880 in cities like Cleveland, Detroit, and Philadelphia, you found numbers like 70 to 85% of black kids living in two-parent families. Now, how do you explain that? Can you say that there was not as much racial discrimination in the United States in the late 1800s or the early 1900s? No, that doesn't cut water. The discrimination just plain cannot explain. It cannot explain the high crime rates, which are devastating to the black community. And black people huddled in their homes at night, living under conditions, many times under conditions in poor neighborhoods that the average American wouldn't believe or tolerate. I mean, for example, in Washington, D.C., mothers serving their children their meals on the floor so as to avoid stray bullets, or fearing to come to the window because of stray bullets, worrying about whether their kids are going to get home alive when they went to school. And it's not the Klan riding into the neighborhood causing this kind of mayhem. You cannot attribute it to discrimination. Well, there are a number of other things I talk about in the book. I try to apply economics to a whole range of problems. I try to explain some complex economics things to people who don't know much economics. Matter of fact, I had a very tenacious mentor at UCLA, Dr. Armin Alshin, and we were talking in the hallway during a faculty graduate student coffee hour, and he said to me, he says, "Williams, you know, the truest test of whether somebody knows their subject is whether they can explain it to somebody that doesn't know a damn thing about it." And I kind of take delight in trying to explain economics in ordinary language to ordinary people in ways that they can understand it. And I apply economics to many things. I try to make people think. Matter of fact, my columns, in my opinion, and on my appearances on radio, I look at them as an extension of my classroom. Try to get economics, good economics out to the masses. I try to break some economic myths. You know, people have asked me things like, "Well, Williams, what's the greatest human motivation? What's that human motivation that gets wonderful things done?" Well, I'm honest with people. I say greed. I mean, that is, now I'm not talking about ripping off people and robbing, stuff like that. I'm talking about people not giving a hoot about anybody else but themselves. That is the motivation that gets wonderful things done. You know, for example, you know, I talk in some of the columns about, For example, there's, Texas cattlemen. They were going out last winter, running down stray cows, feeding them, maybe getting kicked in the face by the cows, just to make sure New Yorkers had beef on their shelves. You had Idaho potato farmers getting up in the morning, doing back-breaking work, sun shining on them and bugs biting them, making huge personal sacrifice to make sure New Yorkers also had potatoes. Now, do you think they're doing that because they like New Yorkers? They may hate New Yorkers. I'm not that wild about New Yorkers myself. But they make sure that beef and potatoes gets to New York every single day. Now ask yourself the question, how much beef and potatoes do you think New Yorkers would have if it all depended on human love and kindness? I worry about New Yorkers. All of you have cars. You came here in automobiles. Now, do you think you have that automobile because some Detroit assembly line workers cared about you? They don't give a damn about you. But they care about themselves. They're trying to get more for themselves. And this is what Adam Smith was talking about in The Wealth of Nations. He says that the public good is served by the private interest. And so I support greed. That is, I want people to try to get as much as they can for themselves in honest ways. Well, let me stop there. I know you have some questions that you might want to try, or you have some friends that told you to ask a question when you come. But let's try a few.
We have a mic.
There's a mic. Where's the mic?
The guy.
Okay, come down here. Well, give this old guy, Hank, first question.
Walter, given the subject matter of theft,
Pretend you're a drill sergeant.
given the subject matter of theft, what is your view about the payment of reparations to black people as a result of slavery?
Well, first of all, with regard to payments with reparations issue, I personally think that slave owners should make payments to slaves for the injustices. But we're going to have to take care of that business somewhere else, either in heaven or hell. Now, there is no way that a white person living today has any obligation for slavery. No responsibility for slavery. And what people are many people with this reparations business, they're saying that essentially that a white of today should compensate a black of today for what a white of yesterday did to a black of yesterday. Now, to me, that does not make sense. Now, same way, that is, if an Indian came to my house saying, Walter, I want you to compensate me, I would go get my gun. Not because I have anything against Indians, but I just don't want foolish people knocking on my door. No,
okay. Basically, what I hear you saying, then, the reparations that are being paid around the world today, such as what's going on in Germany, what's going on with the people who were slave laborers during the days of the war, that you would support that.
Well, I think that in the case of Japanese Americans, for example, who were interned during the Second World War, well, those are a current generation of people who were abused by a living generation of people. Now, I think that there should be some compensation. But however, I have problems with that because they're compensating them with my tax dollars. See, I didn't do a damn thing. I didn't have anything to do with getting the Japanese interned. So I don't feel any obligation whatsoever. In the case of Jews in Germany, you might have a case for reparations, but you're talking about 100 years when everybody's dead who's involved with injustice. I can't quite see the argument. Let's try this gentleman, then that guy back there.
Just making a quick reference to your first principle of self-ownership. I don't know if you're aware of the incident or not, but within the month, a court in England, hearing the case brought to her by the government health service about a girl who's about 15, 16 years old, who has a diseased heart and cannot be expected to live for about 15 years. They wanted to do a heart transplant on her. She didn't want it. Well, guess what? The court said go ahead, and they did.
I think that's despicable. I think that's just plain wrong. I mean, that's theft.
Social ill.
Yeah, it's theft. Now, I believe people have the right to sell their organs. I believe that people should have the right to bequeath their organs to their heirs. Matter of fact, my doctor some years ago, he was trying to get me to stop smoking, and so I told him. I said, what sense does it make to put pink lungs in the ground? I told him that when you die, you should go out in the Big Bang. That's the optimal way. That is, everything should be wrong with you. Because, and you kind of feel sorry for the guy who died with just one thing, a heart attack. Because his liver is good, it means that he did not drink enough. Lungs are good, he did not smoke enough. Now, I was telling my doctor, I said, now, if I could sell my organs, if I could bequeath my organs, let's say to my daughter, I would have incentive to take better care of them. Because, if you can't bequeath something, I mean, what's the optimal balance to leave here? It's zero. I mean, if you cannot bequeath, let's say, money to your heirs, well, you should die with zero. The same thing with your organs. The gentleman back there.
Walter, you were talking about there's nothing in the Constitution about education. So what do you say to these people who say, when you say the federal government shouldn't be involved in education, they say, well, then what about all the poor black kids in the ghetto? Who's going to teach them how to read and write?
Well, I would say that the government schools have produced a devastating product. In terms of the black education, that is, black education through the government schools is nothing less than fraud. That is, if I were the Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan, and I wanted to sabotage black academic excellence, I could not find a better way to do so than the current government schools in most cities. Now, if you look for black academic excellence, in poor neighborhoods, you see it in black schools, owned and operated schools, such as Marva Collins School in Cincinnati and Chicago and Oshkosh, the Marcus Garvey School in Los Angeles, down in the so-called troubled section of Los Angeles. Ivy Leaf School. Now, I've been to those the schools I've just mentioned. I've walked through every single classroom. And those kids, black kids at the school from poor and low and moderate income families, many female-headed households, 85% of those kids at each of those schools read at or above, sometimes 6 years above grade level. And try, if you go to Marcus Garvey School in Los Angeles, it's out on Slauson Avenue, and Dr. Palmer is the founder and headmaster of the school. And he will take you around the school. I was walking around Marcus Garvey. This was 2 years ago. Dr. Palmer tried to get me. He's been trying to get me to visit, and so he was taking me around the school to the classrooms. And I was walking into science class, and teacher had asked the kid the chemical name for magnesium, and he said Mn. And she said, very good. And this is a sixth grade kid, a sixth grade. Chemistry class or science class. And as he was ready to sit down, he gave the atomic number. He said, well, it's atomic number, I think it was 12 or something like that, 13. And you say, well, how is this academic excellence achieved in these schools? Well, the kids come to school sober in the morning. They left their knives and guns at home. You can walk down the hallway, let's say in Ivy League in Philadelphia, you can walk down the hallway and you could hear a rat piss on cotton. I mean, it's that quiet. I mean, the kids are in their seat actually looking at the teacher. It's no magic. There's no magic, and let's say Miss Cleasta Mims, she's the headmistress of Margaret Collins School in Cincinnati. When kids come to when kids enroll in the school, she says that parents have to come once every month to get updates on the kids and the progress of the kids. She also requires that if she has a parent, she summons the parent to school. If the parent does not come, the kid is out of the school. But the government schools can't do that. The gentleman there.
Hi, you talk about the devastation of the public education system, and now there's a big push to bring that system to healthcare. And my question is about the motivation of the people that advocate these things. Is that because they're bureaucrats and they're self-motivated to perpetuate themselves, or can you discuss?
Well, just very briefly, I think that there's nothing older in the history of mankind than the idea that wisdom resides in the few, the elite, and they have been ordained to forcibly impose that wisdom on the rest of us. That's the ugliest parts of human history are explained by that kind of phenomena, where people think that they have the right to control the lives of other people. It's an arrogance. I mean, just think about this for a second. Now, suppose I write a letter to the Congress of the United States, or any of you write a letter to the Congress of the United States. Just say Walter Williams does. And I tell the Congress of the United States, my name is Walter Williams, and I am an emancipated adult. I am fully capable of taking care of my own retirement needs. If I fail to do so, let me depend on charity or die in the streets. But stop taking money out of my paycheck to put in your bankrupt retirement plan named Social Security. Now, how do you think that would be greeted by the Congress of the United States? It'd be greeted with contempt. That is, here I am, an adult, and I want to take care of my own retirement. Now, if I'm too resolute in wanting to do that by not sending my money, they'll kill me.
That's right.
Look, you might say, well, some of the listeners might say, the viewers might say, well, what's this guy talking about killing? Well, suppose I tell the agents of the United States Congress, I'm not allowing any of my money to go to Social Security. What are they going to do? They're going to fine me. And I say, I'm not going to pay your fine. They say, well, we're going to take your house. I'm going to say, no, you're not. This is my house. They're going to send armed agents to take my house, and I'm going to be in my window armed to protect my house, and they're going to kill me. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. And by the way, going to that point a little bit more, if you come in a few weeks when the fellow's going to talk about the Second Amendment, Yates?
Don Cates.
Don Cates, yeah, and who?
Joyce Malcolm.
And Joyce Malcolm. I think it's very important for Americans to look at the meaning of the Second Amendment, why the framers gave us the Second Amendment. Now, you have these people in Washington and in your state capitals and people in newspapers, they're telling you that they're suggesting that the framers of framers of our Constitution gave us the Second Amendment so we can go deer and duck hunting and maybe shoot a few clay pigeons over the weekend. That's not the reason. If you read through the stated messages of people like George Mason, Thomas Jefferson, Madison, they say things like the right to keep and bear arms needs to be protected so that American people can protect themselves against the United States Congress. It's not to protect us against criminals and to go deer and duck hunting. It was to protect ourselves against the United States Congress. And a lot of people say, well, it means a well-regulated militia. Well, what did George Mason say when somebody asked him what's a well-regulated militia? He says that a militia consists of all males above the age 16 except a few public officials. They were the words of George Mason.
You used economics at the constitutional level. I'm at the county level. How do you have some suggestions on how you use economics against your government when they're capable of taking all the money from you that they want and then restrict you from cutting your timbers or from zoning or using your property in the way you see fit, and you have not delegated that power to them, but they just come and take it and then take the money to do it? The only thing I know is through the courts. I like to see more economic solutions from you.
Well, I don't have all the solutions. I don't have all the answers. I think a part of the answer for all this lies in trying to convince our fellow Americans on the moral superiority of liberty. That is, a lot of people say, well, we got to change politicians. I say, no. But politicians are not to blame for these problems that we have. We can blame them a little bit. We can blame them for not being statesmen. We can blame them for being hustlers. We can blame them for being liars. But, ladies and gentlemen, the bulk of the blame lies with you and I, because politicians are doing precisely what you and I elect them to office to do. And what do we elect them to office to do? We elect them to office to use the power of their office to take what belongs to one American and give it to us. Or to give one American a privilege that will be denied another American. I mean, you see this, you say, well, not we people in California. Well, imagine.
I thought you went to UCLA.
Imagine I'm running for the United States Senate in California. Now, I go up and down the state and I tell the people of California, look, I have read the United States Constitution, namely Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution, and if you send me to Washington, don't expect for me to bring back Meals on Wheels, aid to higher education, highway construction funds, because it's not in the Constitution of the United States. Do you think I would get elected to the Senate? No, I wouldn't. Now, here's the tragedy of it, ladies and gentlemen, that from a narrow economic self-interest point of view, Californians will be exactly right not sending me to the United States Senate. Why? Because if I don't bring back billions of dollars worth of goodies, it doesn't mean that Californians will pay a lower federal income tax. All it means is that Nevada will get it instead. That is, when legalized theft begins, it pays for everybody to get involved. And those who don't get involved wind up holding the brown end of the stick. So that is the tragedy. It's making sense for all of us to get involved with using government to take somebody else's money. It's a tragedy in happening in our country. Now, you'll get a lot of people say, some of your politicians out here will say, well, Williams, all these things are justified in the Constitution under the General Welfare Clause. That is utter nonsense. And if you read the words of people like Madison, Madison, James Madison, he objected to money going to some French refugees, I believe in 1789, 1792, something like that. And he said, I'm virtually quoting him, he says, I cannot lay my finger on the article in the Constitution that warrants Congress taking the money of their constituents for the purposes of benevolence. And James Madison is the father of the Constitution. So he should know. And with regard to the word general welfare, he says that, as a matter of fact, I think I quoted in the foreword to the book, in the preface or the introduction. He says that if we apply the word general welfare to everything, it'll turn the Constitution into something that was not contemplated by its designers. Let's get a couple more questions. Gentleman, way back there. No, the guy standing.
Walter, could you give us some your thoughts about the privatization of Social Security, if that or happen, or when it will happen?
Well, I think that privatization has to come because Social Security system is going to collapse. With the robust economy, we've just postponed the collapsing, maybe a year. Now, it's estimated that the expenditures are going to start exceeding revenues in 2014, 2012. And the system will go absolutely bankrupt in 2032, 2033. Now, I think that what we need to do, we need to begin to take this window of opportunity to privatize Social Security. Now, here's what I would do if I had it my way. I would tell every single American who is age 45 or under that forget whatever you put in Social Security, kiss it goodbye, you're not going to get a dime. With all those above age 45, I would give them the option of opting out, or I would say, well, you're going to get what we promised. Now, the reason why 45 is chosen is because if a person put the same amount of money that he would have put into Social Security between 45 and 65 into a private retirement account, he'll break even with what he got in Social Security, what he would get in Social Security. And those who start at a much younger age, they will be even superior. I believe that it is possible, if through a private retirement plan, for most people on retirement, let's say the average worker, to be almost a millionaire. There's almost no question. And matter of fact, the stock market, I believe, in any 20-year interval has returned something like 10 to 12%. And Social Security is possibly 1%, sometimes maybe even negative. So I would argue, and other countries have begun the privatization. In Chile, Jose Pinero talks a lot about the Chilean privatization, and almost everybody's opted out. Now, and you see some of the tragedies. You get these people in the United States, congressmen, criticizing those congressmen who say, let's say, we ought to privatize. And turns out that some congressmen are from districts, say, I believe in San Diego, where city workers are not in the Social Security plan, and the government's trying to bring them in the Social Security plan, and their representatives are trying to keep them out. And when you have to, I was asking a congressman, I said, look, if you have to force somebody to be in something, he was saying Social Security is a wonderful plan. If you have to force somebody to be in something wonderful, then it kind of raises some questions. A couple more questions?
It's up to you.
I don't know. I want a question from a lady. Yes. I want to be politically correct.
I'm wondering how it is that it's justified today, like in California, we've got a gun ban going on in the state of California.
A gun ban?
A gun ban. They're outlawing copycats now. They're basically finding a way to outlaw guns gradually. It's a progressive move. And or things like education. To me, my 4 children belong to me. The only dictator in their life should be me. Yet the government's dictating to us that we have to put our children in schools. And I'm wondering, how did the states derive this power from the Constitution? I still can't figure it out. I haven't seen where it is it's mandated that we lose the rights that we gained in the federal Constitution. We somehow lose it at the state level.
Well, I can't explain the mechanism because I'm not a lawyer, but I'm against anything that's compulsory. I'm against compulsory education. I think that kids should be, it should be their parents to decide most of what a kid does. And and it's very interesting that we listen to these people after the Columbine shooting in Colorado. We hear these people saying, we ought to hold parents more accountable. I think that parents should be held accountable. But these people fail to realize that over the last 4 decades, the government has been undermining parental authority. Systematically. I mean, for example, in some places, for a kid to go on a school trip, you have to get parental permission, slip sign, to get earlobes pierced. But in some places, you can get an abortion without either the parent permission or knowledge. You know, principals, they sometimes have to get search warrants to open up lockers, to be able to search kids. And so we've been undermining authority. I mean, we can give, schools give out condoms whether parents want them to do that or not. They use sex education to indoctrinate kids, again, undermining authority. You know, I was a colleague of mine, I'm not going to say the university, but he was, he sent a kid to get, you know, the university, as the kids go through the registration line, they got a safe sex kit. And he got this kid to get the safe sex kit. And my colleague and I, we're not spring chickens, but we could not figure out what half the stuff was used for in the safe sex kit. But here you have the school authorities attacking the values that the home values of the kids the first day. So I agree with you, but I can't tell you the mechanism. But I think that more and more Americans, I think we should just see. I don't believe that there's any moral basis for our obeying immoral laws and unconstitutional laws. But however, if you choose to go that route, you have to be prepared for whatever's going to happen to you. But I think that they cannot put 100 million people in jail. And I think that we need to start questioning some of these laws that we just act like sheeple many times, just following, just doing what the government says. One more. This is going to be hard. This guy here. Yes. Okay.
2 questions.
What's the second?
Yeah. The first question is, where in the world is the best government? Where is there an example of a government that understands liberty and freedom? And the second question is, how much credit should Calperthwaite be given for the overall understanding of liberty and freedom in Hong Kong?
Who is that?
Calperthwaite.
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, I would have to say that I believe that in terms of liberty, I would think that it would have to be in the United States. Still. Now, we're losing liberty. You know, it was a great philosopher, David Hume, said, seldom has liberty of any kind been taken all at once. We always lose liberty bit by bit, not in big chunks. Matter of fact, my colleague and late Leonard Reed, the founder of the Foundation for Economic Education in New York, he said that if you want to take liberty away from Americans, you had to know how to cook a frog. And he said that you cannot cook a frog by putting on a pot of hot water and then throwing the frog in the water, because the frog's reflexes are too quick. And by the time his feet would hit the water, he'd hop away and be free. He said the way to cook a frog is to put on a pot of cold water, put the frog in the water, and heat it up bit by bit. And by the time the frog realized he was being cooked, it was too late. It's the same thing with Americans. If anybody came over here talking about taking away all of our liberties all at once, we would righteously rebel. But they are talking about taking away our liberties bit by bit, insidiously. And so we have to stop them. Now, we have an awesome responsibility as Americans, because if liberty dies in America, it's dead all over the world. It's gone forever without Americans to defend liberty. That's an awesome responsibility that we have for our own generation and future generations. Now, with regard to Hong Kong, I think that Hong Kong, at least it has been, a classic example of a free market. I mean, it's an open market. That is, there are very, very low taxes. There's very few regulations. I don't believe they have any import duties. I don't believe they don't have things like unemployment compensation. And subsequently, there's no unemployment there. I think that is a model of laissez-faire. But however, it's my understanding, and I'm not expert in this area, they didn't have political freedom for a long time. And they still might not ever get it, but nonetheless, they have economic freedom. And I think that Hong Kong is a good example of how liberty leads to wealth. That is, Hong Kong is the second richest political jurisdiction in the Far East. And a lot of people say, well, the reason why the United States is rich is because we have a lot of natural resources and things like this. That's nonsense. That is, Hong Kong is literally a rock in the Pacific. It has to even import its water and all of its food, but it's the second richest political jurisdiction because there's freedom. There's economic freedom. And indeed, if you go around the world, the richest people in the world are those people with economic freedom. Well, I mean, Germany was decimated during World War II, but West Germans were far richer than East Germans. Korea was devastated in the Korean War, but South Koreans are richer than North Koreans. Hong Kong Chinese are richer than mainland Chinese. You can't get around it. That is, the liberty, personal liberty, economic liberty, is the road to wealth. Look, folks, I enjoyed coming out here, and I enjoyed talking to you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I want to thank Walter Williams especially for joining with us tonight and his great talk, and for his work on many fronts. He's a master communicator, ranging from being the scholar to the popular press. I also want to thank all of you for joining with us. Again, next time we'll look into the Colosseum for possibilities, or larger maybe. Again, those of you who have not gotten this book, there are copies available, and I'm sure that we could convince Walter to sign a few more if you're interested. And we hope that you will all join with us at future events. Thank you so much, and good night.
Thank you.